All right. I hope. Uh, so I hope all of you are well rested, because studying chess always requires a rested brain. So hence the concern. Anyway, so I think probably almost all of the class was able to find out the right continuation in this position. So that's a very promising sign, and good job everyone, by the way. So how about let's just take a look at it, and then we can move on to the next section or the next topic that we'll be studying. Okay, so yeah, I mean, last week's homework was centered around double check. By the way, just before I start analyzing everything, can anyone just unmute yourself and speak? Slyn, I know that sound is working, and if you're able to see the chessboard, if you're able to see last week's position on your screens. How about Archit? Go ahead. Can you just unmute yourself and talk? If you can see the screen.
Yeah, I can see the screen.
And do you see last week's homework on the screen?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Archit. Yeah, okay, so double check with rook c1. So for those of you who couldn't solve it, I think almost all of the class was able to find the solution. But for those of you who couldn't solve it, our theme of homework was double check, the theme that we were studying for the last 2 weeks. And well, with that in mind, the first move is that's a big hint for the first move. But I guess among the few things we have always tried to keep track of when we looked at our positions was finding the right follow-up, right? And so the first move is not a big deal in and of itself. You have it's the first move kind of forces the it forces White's king to come out of his shelter on the queen side, which is the b1 square, and then the follow-up is important, and especially the follow-up on the fifth or on the sixth move, because that's where Black's attack hits a break, hits a pause, and then you have to find the right move to keep the attack going. In any case, let's take a look. So as we discussed, double check. When a king is under double check, the only way to avoid the double check is by moving the king. And in this instance, White has nowhere else to move but to take Black's rook on c1. Then the queen on c4 check. King has to go to d2. Then queen d3 check. King has to go to e1, because if he goes to c1, then we have queen c2 mate, right? And then king e1, and then queen e3 check, and again king f1 is forced. And now as I said before, Black's attack kind of hits the break. Well, ideally we would have liked for White to play for Black to play something like bishop h3 check and mate, but that's not possible because of this knight. And if you look at this variation a bit deeper, let's say Black now gives rook f8 check, so White goes king g2, queen e2 check, And now white has a very good move, which kind of solves most of his problems, which is knight f2. Yeah, and now it's a very tricky situation. So if queen into f2, then white escapes on h3, and now black is having a hard time giving checks. After queen f5, g4, you can see black has no more checks. I mean, he has a few checks, but no more threats or checks or free checks, right? So let's call it free checks. Meaning that black's attack will come to a halt and white has an extra rook. So in situations like this where you have given material, right? So in this case, we are thinking from black's side, and black has given material. Yeah, initially he had given a rook, then he gave a bishop, he got a knight back, but at the end, black is rook down here, right? Black has given material, i.e. a rook. And in such instances, you want your attack to be free-flowing, like you want your attack to succeed, because if the attack on the king doesn't succeed, then you're just materially down. And here I don't see a way how white's attack can progress. There are no more checks, and if black plays like a waiting move, say something like queen f2, then white can play rook d. And so I'll say here that he has given a rook, and if he cannot give more threats, or eventually checkmate white's king, then black is losing. Because if the attack against king doesn't work, then you're just materially down, meaning you're losing. So white should win here, right? So that's one variation that can happen. However, there is another interesting variation which can happen here, and I was hoping that like I would get to see this variation in your homework. Rook into f2 check, right? So this is also possible. And if king h3, then I have queen h5 checkmate. So let's take a look from the top, right? So you give the check, check, check. Oh, king e1 is forced. If you go king c1, then checkmate. But you go king e1, then queen e3 check, king f1, then you give another check, takes, check. King g2 is forced, check. We'll take a look at king g1, but let's say he plays knight f2, then rook into f2 check. And if king h3, there is this queen h5 checkmate. So this variation would have been like a natural question in your minds, like if this works or not. And I was hoping to see at least this variation, or at least you guys giving it a thought. But in any case, that didn't happen. But instead of king h3, white has this fantastic move, king g1. And now that black's problem is that he cannot give a mate on the first rank, right? He cannot give a mate on the first rank, and if black tries to take on d1, then white takes his rook on f2. So that's a very peculiar problem that black is in, and he cannot give a check on g2 because white's queen long from b7 is controlling that, right? So take it. Yeah, and this is a very, very tricky position for black, because it looks like black has a good attack. He has a very powerful attack that white's king should get checkmated. But this is one of those instances of white having good defensive options. So like in this series for the past few weeks, and also like in the next few weeks, and probably in the next few months, we'll still be studying these different tactics, and all of these tactics are revolved around attack, right? So I'll just say all of the tactics we are studying are involved around one thing, which is attack, right? So I mean, how to continue the game when you're on the attacking side, right? Um, we are looking at it from the perspective of the attacking side, right? That's been a common theme for all of these tactical lessons. However, I guess a more higher level topic or chapter to discuss is how to give defense. There are some very what do you say, high complexity, high calculation, and very scary looking games that are played on the chessboard, where it looks like one side has an attack, but the defensive side is coming up with new and new resources. So I'll just give you a preview of the defensive side of things in the next hour or so. But for now, coming back to our main position, main homework lesson, I would say that this particular attack from black doesn't work because white has king g1 and everything looks good, right? And I would say at least it's equal. Like black is not winning, and I don't think even white is winning. The position is unclear. I'll just leave it as equal for now. But yeah, maybe the evaluation can change. So this was one of the key variations to calculate what happens if black just keeps on giving checks and tries to continue his attack by means of giving checks, right? Takes the knife king g1 and then nothing. Black's attack halts. Black's attack is now coming to a halt. Okay, so I'll just stop at that. But this is an important diagram to take a note of. Eventually, this is an important concept on how to keep defense. In every battle, there is an attacking side and a defensive side. And of course, you should study how to attack, but there comes a time when your opposition, like good players are also good defenders, and so you got to study on from the perspective of the defender also. Like how your opponent can defend things. So we'll take a look at that. Don't worry, but for now, let's just call this variation as not working for black. The bishop h3 didn't work, and now again, this is another pausing moment. Like this is the thing that usually we are worried about when we are down material, that black's checks are coming to an halt, right? And how should black continue? Black's checks are coming to a halt, and it seems black's attack is also coming to an halt. And among other things, white has two main threats. So the first threat is obvious, like he's taking the rook on a8. But another subtle threat is this threat of exchanging the white queen. Like so. White wants to play queen b3 check and exchange the queens. And, like one of the key defensive strategies in a lot of games is exchanging pieces. Like so defensive side will always try to look at variation where they can exchange pieces, because the more you exchange pieces, the less your opponent has ammunition to attack. So say for in this instance, we just take off black's queen off the board, black's and white's queen off the board. Black's attack is not there, but what white is left with is an extra rook. So in the end game, that extra rook is going to play a decisive factor. So, right, I mean, if there is no attack on the white king, then then an extra rook is just going to win by itself. So black is under tremendous pressure to keep this attack going. But not just that, he also wants to prevent this more positional threat of exchanging white's queen. And both of these problems are solved by one critical move, which is rook f8. And I think everyone saw this move. But I was looking for an explanation where you tell me what happens after queen b3 check. And can anyone just speak up? What happens after queen b3 check?
What about bishop e6?
That's right. So bishop e6, and you can see that the check is met by a discovered check. So another key concept that we have already studied, bishop e6 check. And that's how black is protecting against the threat of exchanging queens. So check meets with a check, white has to move, and then you take bishop to b3. Let's say if a b3, then maybe take the knight also, and now black has decisive material advantage, which is a queen for a rook, right? So even though he's not mating white's king, he has a lot of material. So that's right. So rook f8 is a fantastic move, and I'm glad like all of you found it. But this is another subtle reason that rook f8 is a strong move, because we are avoiding this threat of exchange of queens, right? Yeah, and I know white's play becomes forced. Like the same thing happens. Let's say if he plays queen d5, then again bishop e6, discovered check. Let's say he plays something like queen b4. Can anyone suggest a move?
I can.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Bishop h3 checkmate.
Oh, that's right. So bishop h3 double checkmate. Again, the same thing. So black's bishop is under attack by the white knight. His rook is under attack by the white queen. But because it's a double check, it's a mate. Like, so it's a double check. The king has to move, and the king cannot move. So it's double checkmate. Yeah, so that's the reason queen b4 also doesn't work. I'm sorry, I thought my video was on, so let me just start my video. Okay. All right, so yeah, so queen b4 doesn't work for that reason. So like among other things, bishop h3 double checkmate is a very strong threat, and that's what white has to protect against. So he plays king g2, and now play becomes like now very simplified after this. White black just plays queen e to check, king g1 take, maybe king g2 back again, then queen e to check, king g1. I guess there are a few ways to win after this. How about somebody helps me out with that?
You can do queen e3 check.
Okay, queen e3, and if I play king g2,
You take the knight.
Okay, yeah, I guess that also works, right? So you just end up with decisive material advantage,
I
right?
have
So
another
you end
one.
up with the piece.
I also have another one.
Okay, who's this?
Adeep.
Adeep, my friend. It's been so long
So
since I've heard your voice. Where have you been?
I kind of wasn't talking. So, anyways, bishop
Okay.
to e4.
Sorry. So take, and right about here or here. Ah, bishop e4. Yes, I think that's also a strong move.
Because you threaten the checkmate, and black has to find a way to defend it.
Right, right. So yeah, bishop e4. If I take queen into e4, then what?
Then rook to f1.
Rook to f1. That's right. There is rook f1. There is queen f2. There is queen f1. Right. All kinds of mate, right? But rook f1 is also mate. Yeah, and the same thing for knight into e4. Again, rook f1, right? Sorry. That's also mate. But I think bishop e4 has some problems. Can anybody help me find it out? So how about this? Let's take a few minutes. I'll give you guys 5 minutes to think on this. So think on this. 5 minutes. Think on this. Why bishop e4? Why black's last move was a mistake? It looks strong. By the way, I'm take 5 minutes. I'm gonna mute everyone. Okay. No discussion, only thinking. This is time to think. I will just say that I'm, as all of you might be knowing, I'm corresponding with a few of your friends on the chat. I'm getting all sorts of interesting variations, but no correct exploitation yet. I still have to see a variation which is accurate and exploiting black's mistake. Like white should exploit black's mistake. He should punish black for his last move. What I mean by that is that white has a chance to win the game now, and that's what I want you to find. White to play, and white wins. Right, like black's move was a last move was a serious mistake. White should win after this. But also I will say that calculate all the variations and not just your moves, not just your alternatives. Calculate how black will respond to your ideas. Calculate how black will respond to white's attack or white's whatever you're calculating with white. Okay, so calculate the different ways black can respond. So that's very important. I'm seeing that you guys still have a lot to catch up with that. Right, so I did get a very accurate answer from one of your friends, and I think it's a very good sign. I'm also getting some other variations. So let's take a look at all those variations one by one. Okay. Let's give you guys 2 minutes, 2 more minutes, and then I can start. And then I will call it a timeout. Okay, 2 more minutes. Okay, time's up. Time's up. Now I did get a right answer, but I think there are some variations that that were missed, or at least not considered. Anyway, so let's take a look at it. Bishop e4, the simplest thing, and I think we saw this. If white takes the bishop, then true, like black cannot take the knight because the queen is protecting the knight, so this knight is protected. Yes, I agree with that, but there is a much bigger threat for white, which is this rook f1 checkmate, right? So the knight is irrelevant at this point. What's more critical is this, boom, the white king, right? So bishop e4 is, that's why a strong move. Like it's not a strong move actually, but it has the appearance of a strong move. The appearance that, hey, I'm attacking the white queen. I'm also giving a checkmate threat, and so, right, and so black thinks he's being smart by playing the bishop f e4. But now let's see what happens. Always be mindful, like so. I asked the question why black's last move was a mistake. Now, yes, I know that you guys were trying to find out how white can exploit it or how white can win, but always be mindful that black has now two mating threats, or two major mating threats. First of all, he has this mating threat on the back rank, right? So there is this rook f1 checkmate mating threat, but also another mating threat is queen g2 check. Okay, so even if the rook on f8 disappears, let's say this rook disappears, black still has the mate on g2. Black has two major checkmate threats. The one is on f1 with his queen or rook, right? So that's the combination of with this queen and rook. But the second is on g2. With his queen, like supported by the bishop. The bishop on e4. So be cognizant of these two mating threats always when you're looking at the variation. And like that's why I'm getting the feeling, or like that's why I repeat that you have to take into account what your opponent is thinking. So after bishop e4, we have switched sides. We are saying that black's last move was a mistake, right? And yeah, okay. White here has an opportunity to win. Like he has the opportunity to turn the tables. From losing side, he's going to winning side. He has that opportunity. But you have to be cognizant of what these two things are doing here. So that's why knight into e4 or queen into e4 are not going to work. As most of you have obviously seen, queen b3 check is like an obvious continuation. Okay, so queen b3 check, and now what does black do? Okay, if black plays something like rook f7, which is not a very strong move, then white can just take because he has the support of his knight, and if king h8, then checkmate, right? So we have this checkmate, but rook f7 is not a strong move. He can play king h8. Okay, so here I got a very interesting. Suggestion or moves. Well, two ideas that was suggested to me. One was why can't we play knight f7 check? And if black takes the rook, then I'll take the. If black takes the knight, then I can take the rook. And white is exchange, right? So that's one variation that I got, that white is exchange up. But what's the problem here? Right, as I said at the start of this variation, there is this checkmate on g2, and yeah, white actually gets checkmated. So white is not really winning here; he's losing. He's not exploiting. Black's mistake. And the other idea was really interesting, which is queen g8 check. Okay. Now I like this idea, and the variation was if black plays rook into g8, then white has this knight f7 checkmate. So white wins here. But I will repeat myself again, which is that you always have to consider the different options your opponent can play. Like, so after queen g8 check, it is very easy to wish. Like it's wishing at this point. You're wishing that your opponent plays rook into g8 and then you get a checkmate. So it's wishing, or it's daydreaming, or you're being like extremely hopeful, which is hopeful beyond reason. Like, black is not obliged to play rook into g8, right? He's not obliged to go into this mating threat. The other move he can play is simply take back with his king, and yeah, and now white is queen down, and again he has his mating threats. So I asked your friend to just think on what other alternatives black can play after queen g8 check, and she realized that okay, yeah, that black can play king g8 and it's not working. So I'm gonna say that the right answer was found by two of your friends, Devesh as well as Anushka. Anushka got the right answer after some help, meaning some nudging, and I think she also find out the right answer. So let's give Anushka a chance to speak from here onwards. So queen b3 check, right? So bishop e4 is a mistake. It begins with queen b3 check. Black is forced to play king h8, and now let's give Anushka a chance to share her answer.
Then you can do knight f7 check.
Okay, knight f7 check. Okay, so knight f7 check. How does your variation go?
Rook can take f7, or king can go to g8.
Okay, so rook can take f7. That's one variation, or king can go to g8. Those are two moves that black can play, right?
Yeah, and
okay.
then
So say I take rook takes f7. What are you gonna play?
queen b8 check.
That's right, queen b8 check. Don't care about the rook, care about the king. See, your king is under attack, so you have to go after his king. A king for a king, right? When your king is under attack, the only other way to counterattack is to attack your opponent's king. The rook and bishop and queen, they all are meaningless if your king is under attack. So when your king is under attack, go after your opponent's king. So yeah, queen b8 check, and now it's leading to a mate, right?
Yeah.
What will black play here, Anushka?
Black can do rook f8.
That's right. Rook f8 is one move.
And
Take.
then, yeah,
And
checkmate.
mate. That's right. So that happens. So rook into f7 leads to checkmate. So he cannot play rook into f7. He has the other alternative of playing king g8, right?
Yeah.
Now what will
If
white
king
play?
g8, then knight goes to h6 check.
Knight at 6 check. Okay. Now what will black play? So knight at 6, so again, this is coming back to a theme which is double check. It's a check by the white queen, right? And it's also checked by the knight. So when a king gets a double check, he has to move. You cannot do anything else. So king has to move to h8. That's forced, right?
Yes.
Now
And
what?
then queen g8 check.
Now queen g8 check. That's correct. So now the queen is protected by the knight, so he cannot take with the king. He cannot take with the king because it's protected by the knight, so he has to take with the rook. And now what?
And then knight f7 checkmate.
Knight f7 checkmate. That's correct. So Anushka, I'm just a bit curious. What do you think is, what do you think is the difference between the first answer you shared with me and the second answer you shared with me? I'd like to hear it in your own words.
The first answer, I forgot that the queen wasn't guarded by the knight, which allowed the king to take the queen.
Right, correct. And so Can you just repeat something that I say in relation to that? Like, so in our calculations, what should we keep in mind? What should we keep in our head when we're doing calculations?
To always check if the piece is guarded or, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I will rephrase it. Always look for what else your opponent can play. Always put yourself in your opponent's shoes. Always think about the different ways your opponent can reply to your move, right? So sometimes our emotions can overwhelm us. So for in this instance, I think the idea of spotting this checkmate is it's really exciting, right? So at first, when you see this checkmate, you want to play that move. And I've seen many of my students losing winning games because they made a mistake in their calculation, right? For like just take this position for example. Queen g8 check. I mean, you yourself saw this idea, Queen g8 check, and then I think this idea is fantastic, right? So this idea is fantastic, and you want to execute that idea on the board. But if you're not careful, if you hurry, if you don't think in your opponent's shoes, like if you don't stop and look what else your opponent can play, then you can end up losing this game, right?
Yeah.
Because your opponent can take this. But if you just take a pause and say, okay, let me put in my opponent's shoes, then you will find that, okay, sorry, what happened? Bishop e4. Sorry. So I'm sorry that cut the flow. So, but if you take a pause and looked at what your opponent can play, then you know that okay, after king queen g8 check, he can play king into g8, and I will lose. And so it will force you to look at alternatives. It will force you to look at alternatives and find the right execution. See, your idea is correct. I will give you full marks for finding the right idea, and I will applaud you for finding this creative idea. So that's a job well done. But a good idea without the right execution will always fail. A good idea needs the right execution. You need to execute it in the right way for it to be effective. And the right way to do that is by transferring your knight from g5 to h6, because from h6 then you will support your queen, and then you can execute that same pattern. And that's what we did here. Okay, so we are transferring our knight from g5 to h6, and in that journey we like in that variation we have to take into account what else can happen. So for in this instance, black can take rook into f7, and you have to spot this back rank checkmate, right? You have to spot this back rank mate before you can start executing on that variation. And then, okay, then king g8, and once you have transferred your knight to h6, then this beautiful mate is possible, right? I'll also put another diagram to queen b8 check. So again, just to reiterate, right idea also needs right execution. By the way, Devish also found all the variations. So Devish, good job. Okay, so let's just take a look back at bishop e4. Bishop e4, we found out why it's a mistake. And yeah, so take a queen e3 check, g2, and then queen into g5 is winning. So let us take a look from the top, and I guess it's a good, we'll take a break in about 5 minutes, and then we'll again resume after the break. So yeah, rook c1 check, king takes c1, queen c4 check, king d2, queen d3 check, king e3, sorry, king e1, queen e3 check, king f1, and now rook f8. So by rook f8, black is protecting against both the ideas, his hanging rook as well as this positional threat of stopping the exchange. Right. So that's a crucial one. Black is protecting himself from two threats. One is his rook on 8, and the second is even more important, which is exchange of the queens by queen b3 check. Okay. So if queen b3, then bishop e6 check hits a discovered check, and then black gets the queen. Right. Okay. So rook f8, fantastic move. King g2, queen e2 check. King g1 take. King g2, queen e2 check. And then the safest way for black to convert his advantage is to just take this piece. When, however, things can go wrong, or black can be unlucky if he does not calculate as to what happens after bishop e4, right? So bishop e4 again is a fancy move. I mean, I think it's a very nice idea. So credit to Adib for suggesting this. It's a beautiful idea. But if this idea is not cross-checked, see, on the flip side, sometimes you have to cross-check or validate and verify your ideas to see if your opponent doesn't have any counterattack. And bishop e4, if you don't calculate that the white has this queen b3 check and attack against black's king, then you will end up losing, right? And this is how I've seen a lot of my students losing their one games. And then the whole thing happens, they start crying, and okay, and then they don't want to play chess for a few weeks, and but they're all right after in the end. But that's a lot of pain you can avoid. Okay, so that's a lot of pain, right? If you lose a winning game, and you can avoid that by good calculation. And but don't worry, like if you're thinking about what do I need to do to make my calculation better, that's exactly why I'm here. That's exactly what we're doing here. So keep looking at the notes, like always revise the notes when I publish them, and keep doing the homework. That's how you'll become better at calculation. Okay, so bishop e4 doesn't work, and then black can just play queen e3 check, and he's peaceful, and he wins. Okay. All right. Any questions before we head off for the break? All right, so I'm gonna mute myself. You guys feel free to go on a break, do whatever you want to do. We'll resume back in 15 minutes, in exactly 15 minutes. So that will be 10:55. Okay. All right.